We recently got our first look at Netflix's live-action adaptation of One Piece in the form of a teaser trailer. Now, this has been a long time coming, as it was first announced all the way back in 2017 as part of the manga's 20th anniversary celebration. I personally am really excited about this show because I get to share the story that I grew up with and obsess over with a bunch of new people. See, I wanted to make this video to talk about all of the cool little details that are found in this trailer, but I also wanted to make this engaging and informative for both longtime fans as well as anyone who hasn't read or watched the series. If you are interested in getting into One Piece, I'll leave a link in the description to the official translation where you can read it on the Viz website. The first few chapters, as well as the latest few chapters that come out every week, are free, but you can access the entirety of the series as well as the rest of the Shonen Jump catalog for about $2 USD a month. Real quick, so what is One Piece and why do I care about it so much? The story follows a boy named Monkey D. Luffy who dreams of becoming the king of the pirates, a title that's reserved for the pirate who's able to find the greatest treasure in the world, the One Piece. On his journey, he travels from island to island, recruiting crewmates, fighting other pirates, and the marines who chase after them. And that's the basic premise. That probably doesn't sound too compelling. See, it's hard for me to sell to someone on the series without gushing about the series nonstop and spoiling the best parts of it. After the first initial investment of 100 or so chapters, you start getting paid off tenfold, constantly. I know that's asking a lot, but the straightforward, unassuming nature of that part of the series is crucial to lulling the reader into a false expectation of what'll come next. After a certain point, you're constantly being challenged on what you think is possible in this series, where the story could go, what genre will Oda tackle next, what tropes will he try and subvert, what social commentary will he make, all under the guise of a children's comic. The only way I can put the experience of reading One Piece into words is if I wrote the manga again myself. But that's enough of that. Let's get into this trailer.
Ever since I was a kid, the sea's been calling. So, I'm setting out to follow my dreams.
We open on a shot of a portside village with these big buildings in the back featuring windmills. This is Windmill Village, and it's here that we find our protagonist, Monkey D. Luffy, in Chapter 1 of the manga. Luffy is played by Mexican actor Iñaki Godoy, and in the first shot of him, we see him in the iconic red vest and straw hat. But if you look closely, you'll notice that he has the same scar under his eye as he does in the manga. It's a bit less noticeable in the live action, but it does account for the realism of how scars heal over time. In the background, we can make out a ship with a figurehead that resembles a dragon or a beast. This is likely the ship used by Shanks and his red-haired pirates in Chapter 1 of the manga. Red-haired Shanks is a great and powerful pirate who's integral to the start of Luffy's journey, and we'll talk more about him in a bit as you see a brief glimpse of him later on in this trailer. Now, this first shot of the trailer pays homage to the very first few panels of Chapter 1 of the manga, titled Romance Dawn. One Piece is inherently a journey of romance in the classic literary sense, and these themes of romance and the dawn and what that means are recurring throughout the series. Romance Dawn was also the name of a couple stories written by Ichiro Oda before he made One Piece. These one-shots work as the precursor to what would eventually become the series we all love. Also of note, the lighting in this shot suggests that this is taking place at dawn, but if you notice throughout the trailer, you'll see this yellowish color gradings everywhere. On one hand, this is definitely reminiscent of the style of classic pirate media, but it also helps to create this ever-present feel of the dawn. Romance Dawn is baked into the tone and style of this series. One last thing before we move on from this shot. The quick musical cue you hear during the start of it is a nod to the first opening of the One Piece anime, We Are. This song is beloved by the fandom at large, so this is a much appreciated homage to the anime. I wonder if we'll hear any more references to the many One Piece openings as we progress throughout the series. Of note, we actually see the Going Merry being constructed here. This is a departure from the manga, where the Going Merry was gifted to the Straw Hats. It'll be interesting to see how they end up getting the ship in the live action. We also see Luffy sitting in his favorite seat on the ship, atop the figurehead, just like in the manga. Notice another ship in the background though. This is the Baratie, a seafaring restaurant on the ocean, and we'll see more of this a bit later on. In the manga, characters change their clothes fairly often, usually arc to arc, but sometimes even multiple times within a single arc. And it seems like the live action is going to stay true to this part of the series. In the first shot of Monkey D. Luffy, we see him in his iconic red vest look, but there are a couple of differences from his initial appearance in the manga. Firstly, the straw hat he has a strap on it. Now this did eventually end up in the manga, but it wasn't until much later on in the series. You'll also notice that Luffy is wearing shoes throughout this trailer. This is a departure from his traditional sandals that he rocks throughout the series, but this is probably for practical and safety reasons. Now there's some really cool stuff going on with the outfits in this trailer. In the shot of Luffy reaching for the Going Merry's figurehead, he's sporting a tropical patterned shirt. And while Luffy wears a bunch of different clothes, this is not one of them. This is actually inspired by the shirt he wears on the cover of Volume 11 of the manga. Similarly, the red t-shirt and overalls he wears in the scene atop the figurehead is very reminiscent of the color spread featured in Chapter 28. Let's get into the next part.
I'm gonna be king of the pirates! I need is a loyal crew. And I think together we'd make a pretty good team.
This is one of the coolest shots of this trailer by far, as we pan over to Shellstown. Located on Yotsuba Island, this is one of the first stops for Luffy on his journey to become the Pirate King. Its adaptation from the manga to live action is just amazing. And atop the town sits the 153rd Marine Branch, with these striped towers taken directly from the manga itself. The Marines are one of the primary antagonistic forces in the series, and Luffy and his Straw Hat Pirates are outlaws on paper. This question of who uses their position in society to better the world is tackled very early on. As we move around this enclosed courtyard in the Marine base, we come to learn that this opening narration from Luffy is actually being said to a green-haired man tied to a post. Enter the pirate hunter Roronoa Zoro, played by the Japanese actor Makenyu. The son of Sonny Chiba, Makenyu might be familiar to some from other anime live-action adaptations, such as his portrayal of Scar from the 2022 Full Metal Alchemist films, or the recent Knights of the Zodiac film where he played Seiya. Roronoa Zoro is a swordsman who joins Luffy's crew early on in the series as his first mate. He's one of the coolest characters from the series and is a fan favorite through and through. Here he wears his iconic outfit that he wears for most of the early part of the series. Of note, some translations and fans may refer to him as Zolo due to an early mistranslation that has stuck throughout the years. The official Viz English translation has to maintain this for consistency's sake, but please know everyone just refers to him as Zoro. Behind Zoro is what seems to be a large poster of a man. This appears to be Captain Morgan, the man in charge of the 153rd Marine Branch, played by Langley Kirkwood. In the manga, Captain Morgan is the primary antagonist of the Shellstown arc, and while we don't see a full body shot of him in this trailer, you can make out his face from that poster. Now, this poster is absent from the manga. Instead, I think this is supposed to replace the statue that he has erected later on in the Marine base. While not completely faithful, I think it does make this a lot easier to interact with for the characters, and it still conveys the vanity that Morgan has throughout this arc. Alright, moving on.
We're heading up to the Grand Line.
A treacherous stretch of ocean with bigger islands and bigger pirates. Careful with that.
I don't work for you.
I'm sensing a little bit of tension amongst the crew.
Not a crew.
Now this boat here seems to be the ship Luffy uses to traverse the seas in his early part of the journeys. Here it looks to be either arriving or departing from Shellstown, as the island to the left looks similar to Yotsuba Island that we saw earlier. And if you look a little bit closely, you can see Luffy standing right here and what seems to be Zoro over here. We get this explanation of the Grand Line, a stretch of ocean in the One Piece world, and who better to explain what the Grand Line is than the Straw Hat Pirates navigator Nami, played by American actress Emily Rudd. Nami is a thief by trade who ends up with the Straw Hat crew, and here we see her wearing the same outfit that she wore on her introduction in the manga. We cut to Zoro in action, fighting a man in an all-red outfit with a red ruff collar around his neck. Now there's a lot of speculation regarding to who this could be. The ruff collar could indicate that this is someone from Buggy the Clown's circus-themed crew, as during the Orangetown arc, Zoro did briefly fight a member of the acrobatic Fuwas, or nimble Fuwars depending on the translation, who did have a red color scheme and a somewhat similar collar in the anime. However, many fans have speculated that this is actually Mr. 7 from Baroque Works, not that one. Now, if this is your first time with One Piece, this may not ever be relevant to you for the purposes of this live-action series, but hopefully it will be and we do get a season 2. Baroque Works is a criminal organization that are the primary antagonists of the Alabasta saga, and this series doesn't seem to cover any material that far out in the series. That said, during the Alabasta arc, we find out that Zoro had previously been offered a position with Baroque Works, one that he quickly turned down. The man sent to offer this position was the previous Mr. 7, who was killed when trying to recruit Zoro by force. In the manga proper, we never get to see who this Mr. 7 is or what he looks like, but in a fan question asked in Volume 36's SBS Corner, Oda draws a quick sketch of the character. If you look closely during this fight, you can sort of make out what may be a 7 on his cheek, and he does seem to have his hair styled in 4 spikes, just like Mr. 7 in the drawing, although in a different orientation. As for why he's dressed like this, I can only imagine they went for a sort of Baroque period inspired style for this character, as ruff collars were a common thing around that era. If this is true, it means the live action series is creating an adaptation using all sorts and shapes of Oda's ideas, and it's amazing. This is much more than just a one-to-one retelling of the manga that we all know and love. These are some of the coolest creative liberties I've ever seen in a project like this. In this next shot, we see this giant sea monster that is the quote-unquote local sea monster of Windmill Village, sometimes referred to as the Lord of the Coast by fans, and honestly, they did a great job translating this to their live-action world. This thing plays a big role in the first chapter of the manga, and from the scene we're shown, it looks like it will here too. And in this scene opposite the sea monster is the aforementioned red hair Shanks, a key figure in Luffy's adventure. We don't get to see his face in the shot, but it's been reported that he's played by Peter Gajo. We cut to this maritime battle with this giant pink ship on the right. This is the Miss Love Duck, the pirate ship commanded by Iron Mace Alvida, who we see later on in this trailer. The fact that they're adapting all these cool and wacky ships is just great. The ship on the left shoots a cannonball at the Miss Love Duck, and it follows with Alvida's crew preparing to raid that same ship. It looks like we're getting some real maritime battles. And if you look a little bit closer, you'll spot a barrel floating in the waters. This is probably the same barrel Luffy used to save himself from a whirlpool that he counters almost immediately after setting sail for the first time. With this scene and the previous one of Shanks and the Sea Monster, I do wonder how the series will start out. You see, in the manga, Chapter 1 is known as Romance Dawn and details Luffy's backstory before we see him in the present day. However, the anime starts with the events of Chapter 2 as Episode 1, and revisits the events of Chapter 1 later on in the series. As of now, we don't really have a firm grasp on how these episodes will be paced out and how the source material will get adapted, but I'm excited to see how it goes. Then we get this terrifying shot of Buggy the Clown, the primary antagonist of the Orangetown arc played by Jeff Ward. As mentioned earlier, Buggy is the captain of a circus-themed pirate crew and plays a fairly decent role in the series at large. This portrayal of Buggy definitely seems a bit Joker-inspired, especially with that cackle, and I honestly think it works kinda well. Despite the circus clown motif, Buggy was supposed to be presented as a menacing figure in the Orangetown arc, and I think this take on the character works. I'll note, some have pointed out that we may actually be seeing Buggy's power set at play here. For those in the know, the movement of his head relative to the rest of his body may be a clear tell. However, this could also just be the perspective at play, creating a distorted depiction of this character. But if you remember from the manga, that's exactly how his powers are introduced there as well. Oda played with the perspective of another part of his body. And if this is what I think it is, it's a really nice touch. Here we get some banter from the Straw Hat crew as Nami scolds Zoro for being a little reckless with his cargo, what looks to be a treasure chest. And as we know, there are very few things in this world that Nami cares about more than treasure. They appear to be on the same pre-Going Merry boat that we saw earlier in the trailer, potentially placing this scene right after Shellstown. However, their acquisition of a treasure chest makes me believe this may be after Orangetown, even though in the manga they decided to leave the treasure behind. I also just really like the dialogue here. This scene isn't really from the manga, but it's a fun take on these characters. While the Straw Hat Pirates act as a found family, they weren't always like this, and early on there was a bit of tension. Also of note, we finally see Zoro in his iconic bandana here as well. Alright, let's get to the next part.
We haven't sailed together for very long, but I know we've got each other's backs.
Now this is one of the coolest moments in the trailer. The amazing dog-headed battleship belongs to Vice Admiral Garp, played by Vincent Reagan. And we don't see him in full in this trailer, but you can kind of make out his figure at the front of the battleship. We get a brief glimpse of a fuse being lit, and cut to a cannonball shooting out of Garp's battleship headed directly at the camera. The trailer then cuts to the Straw Hats taking cover from oncoming fire to their ship, which at this point looks to be the Going Merry. Now a couple of things come to mind. First, the inclusion of Garp may suggest that the live-action series will be covering the cover stories, and for those unaware, each chapter of the manga starts with a cover page. Cover pages are often just whimsical drawings by Oda that don't really have any impact on the story and are just characters in any given context. However, sometimes they do form a sequential story known as the cover story, and these stories almost always circle back and tie into the mainline story. Cover stories are just another medium for Oda to tell the story and build the world, much like the SBS Question Corner is. Ultimately, I think there may be some clever editing going on here. I don't think Garp and his crew are firing at the Straw Hats. If you look closely at the ship, you can see a figure in the back that's a bit brighter and a little bit more in focus than the rest of the crew, similar to how the two figures in the front of the ship are. You can sort of make out the shape of a particular hat. This may be Bogard, which means this scene might be adapting the cover story from Chapter 97. Additionally, I think the scene with the lit fuse could also be from a different scene, specifically from Orangetown with Buggy's Buggy Ball, as the color scheme of the person lighting the fuse doesn't seem to be a Marine uniform. And if all this is true, who's firing at the Straw Hats? Well, the one scene in East Blue where the Going Merry gets fired at with the cannon is from Fullbody's crew in the Baratie. Of course, Luffy manages to deflect it with the Gum Gum balloon, but there might be some changes to that scene given the difficulties of recreating Luffy's abilities in live action, and I'll talk more about that in a bit. And here we get the reveal of Usopp, played by American actor Jacob Gibson. Our first view of him is cowering in fear from an oncoming attack, staying very true to Usopp's character from the manga. Despite being the crew's marksman or sniper, Usopp tells a lot of tall tales and is a known coward. He's dressed in the classic Usopp outfit with the brown bandana and brown overalls. Fans may notice, though, that one of Usopp's iconic characteristics is his elongated nose, and that's gone from this live-action adaptation. Usopp's manga design is a reference to Pinocchio, as Usopp is a notorious liar, and his name is even derived from Aesop of Aesop's Fables, one of which is the infamous boy who cried wolf. That said, early One Piece is a product of its time, and it should be noted that early depictions of black characters in manga were not always respectful or accurate, and oftentimes bordering on caricature. As such, I think a modern-day adaptation of this character makes sense to not have such characteristics that could be mistaken for racism, bias, or prejudice. We get a shot here of Zoro and Luffy also ducking from the incoming attack that seems to be hitting the Going Merry. Zoro seems to be sporting a yellow shirt here, and for many that will remind them of the Enies Lobby look that he had. But since that's a bit too far out in the series, I think this may actually be from the color spread in chapter 28. And if you pay close attention, you'll see that Luffy's also wearing the shirt he's wearing from when the Going Merry was built. And for me, this places the scene is happening right after the Syrup Village arc, meaning this canon is likely coming from Fullbody and not Garp. We get a quick scene of Luffy sinking in the water, and as you'll probably find out in the first episode, Luffy can't swim due to the side effects of the gum gum fruit. This scene is likely from his engagement with an enemy in the Baratie arc, as the bottom of the ship resembles the seafaring restaurant we saw earlier in the trailer. Notice another Luffy costume change here. Once again, this is not an outfit from the manga proper, but rather the shirt he wore in chapter 107's color spread. And we get our final Straw Hat for this season, Sanji, played by British actor Taz Skylar. Sanji is the cook of the crew and works at the Baratie when we first meet him. He's dressed in the blue and white striped shirt along with a black suit, his iconic outfit that he wears for most of the early parts of the series. One noticeable change to his character design, however, is his missing iconic curly eyebrow. I know, this is a big loss for Sanji fans everywhere, as the eyebrow actually has some plot significance much later on in the series, believe it or not. But keep in mind, it would probably look a little too silly for this live-action adaptation. However, if we ever do get to the point where this plot significance matters, then that's a good problem to have, because that means we'll have covered over 800 chapters worth of the source material. Also missing is his classic cigarette, and I'm not sure if they're pulling a 4Kids here and planning on replacing this with a lollipop or a vape or something, but I do hope they keep it in, because admittedly, it does make him look cool. One thing of note, if you look closely, the sequence of Sanji taking his jacket off and saving Luffy might be from a different scene than the one where he's jumping in the water. You'll notice the trees and the rocks behind Sanji are much more reminiscent of Arlong Park than they are of the open ocean of the Baratie. Now we cut to a scene in what appears to be the same enclosed courtyard from Shellstown. We get a quick glimpse of Luffy's stretched out arm, giving us a hint at his rubber powers. But interestingly, instead of a typical gum-gum pistol or gum-gum bullet, Luffy delivers an uppercut. Now this specific sequence is not in the manga, and it seems to be specific to this adaptation. Though it could just be that the scene is also cut differently to prolong the reveal of Luffy's gum-gum attacks. But either way, it'll be interesting to see how they work out Luffy's power set. We also finally get a showcase of Zoro's three-sword style. As crazy as it sounds, Zoro fights with three swords, one in each hand and one in his mouth. Here we see the Wado Ichimonji, a sword very special to Zoro, clutched between his teeth. One thing many fans have pointed out, however, is the Wado Ichimonji is backwards here, with the blade facing away from enemies. Though Zoro has used the back of his swords before in the manga, maybe only on a couple occasions explicitly, and there are even a couple panels in the chapter that this is adapting where the blade is faced toward him. So it's going to be interesting to see if this is actually a plot point or a CGI error like some people are claiming. In the same courtyard, we see Nami fighting off a band of marine soldiers while Luffy gets up from a fight with more soldiers in the back. This scene particularly stands out here though, because Nami was not in Shellstown in the manga. The crew first meet her after the events of this arc. Though perhaps the live action is actually adapting to anime here, where she was in Shellstown trying to steal something from the Marines base. I've been having a bit of difficulty placing Nami's outfit here, a white shirt and black pants. I don't recall this outfit in the manga or any color spreads or volume covers, but given the similarity to the Marines outfits, perhaps this is actually the remnants of a Marine outfit that she was wearing as a disguise. In the manga, Luffy tries to find Zoro's confiscated swords from the Marine base, but perhaps this is a flip and where Nami has to go undercover as a Marine to retrieve them. After all, she is a thief by trade. Here we cut to Usopp's classic slingshot in action, and it looks spot on. Interesting to note the location of the scene. The trees look to me like it's Kokoyashi Village from the Arlong Park arc, though I am wondering what the large figure to the right of him is. You'll also notice here, Usopp's wearing a similar shirt to Luffy's. This is another outfit from Volume 11. Cut to the interior of the Baratie, and we see Sanji walking out of the kitchen with a plate of what seems to be bread. However, the color and shape could also be mistaken for tangerines, Nami's favorite food. We get a quick showcase of Sanji's fighting style based on kicks and other leg-based moves. Some of Sanji's actions in the manga won't be able to be translated into the live action, as the human body doesn't really work that way, but it is impressive that Taz Skylar was able to deliver this stomp while maintaining his balance with his hand in one pocket and a tray of food in the other. This shot also shows us a quick glimpse of Lieutenant Fullbody, a Marine officer who has a taste for the finer things, reported to be played by Jean Henry. Fullbody seems to be brandishing a pistol at an enemy, likely a pirate. This seems exclusive to the live action, however, as Fullbody merely gets into a fight with Sanji in the manga. However, there is something else here. The man across from Fullbody is hard to place, but given the outfit and the pink and purple hair, my initial guess was that this is Eureka from Fullbody's cover story. Eureka was a small-time pirate that crossed paths with Fullbody and the two engaged in battle. The cover story Eureka is from was never actually animated, but we did get their potential color scheme from the digitally colored version of the manga. This cover story takes place much later on in the series, so perhaps they folded it into this arc. However, This man could also be Crescent Moon Galley, a glup shido of a character if there ever was one, though to be fair, the large majority of One Piece characters could be considered glup shidos. Galley is a character from one of the aforementioned Romance Dawn one-shots, where he serves as an antagonist. He did make his way into the actual canon later on in the series, however, as some fans may have recognized him in chapter 902 when he visits the Baratie. His potential inclusion in this part of the series is just another testament to the show's attention to detail. I'm really excited that this show isn't going to be a one-to-one retelling of the story. Having these little Easter eggs and connections keeps the series interesting for even the most hardcore longtime fans. And here we get another brief shot of Luffy sitting atop what seems to be the fully completed Going Merry, likely right before they set sail from Syrup Village. He shouts in excitement, and this blends right into an iconic scene from chapter 100 of the manga, recreated for this series. In the manga, this celebration takes place right at the tail end of the Loguetown arc, which bookmarks the end of the East Blue Saga, with our heroes preparing to enter the Grand Line. They're even standing in the same positions. You might remember that this scene takes place during a harsh storm that's been developing over the course of the arc, while here it seems to be taking place during a sunny day. There have been some rumors that this series will only cover up to and including Arlong Park, which means around chapter 95 of the manga, and if that's true, that means we're probably not getting an episode in Loguetown. We haven't gotten any reports or rumors of casting for characters like Smoker and Tishigi who make their introduction in this arc, so perhaps this idea that we're not covering Loguetown is true, but we'll have to see how they play it. Now let's get into the final part of this trailer.
All great fighters call out their finishing moves.
No, they don't.
The penultimate shot of this trailer finally gives us a good look at Luffy's rubber powers, as we see his iconic attack, the Gum Gum Pistol. In the manga, Luffy ate the Gum Gum fruit, a mysterious fruit that turns whoever eats it into a rubber human, giving them the ability to stretch as we see here. This provides Luffy with the freedom to let his imagination run wild and do all sorts of wacky moves like classic cartoons. Luffy's attacks are inspired by various things, but most noticeably, weapons. He would make these comparisons even before he ate the Gum Gum fruit, claiming that his punch was as strong as a pistol. The Gum Gum fruit just gives him the ability to manifest these ideas through his rubber body. Now this scene here is from chapter 2 of the manga, and takes place on land during the day. However, here it's been changed to take place on a smaller boat during the nighttime. This change was likely for the purposes of masking any irregularities on the visual effects of Luffy's stretching powers. CGI tends to look a lot better in darker settings with less light, and that's why we often get so many big fight scenes across popular media that take place at nighttime with grayish color grading. Regardless of how you may feel about the quality of the CGI on this project, I think it's important to remember this show isn't here to replace the source material, but rather bolster it by creating new fans for the series. If anything, I think there's some charm to the visual effects here, sort of echoing the art style early on in the series. The manga will always be there for anyone who wants to engage with the story how it was originally intended, and we should celebrate the fact that we're getting this story in live action after almost 30 years in publication. Standing beside Luffy here is Koby, a young kid who has dreams of becoming a great marine. Koby is portrayed by Morgan Davies, who you may have seen in the role of Danny from the recent Evil Dead Rise film. Koby is introduced in chapter 2 of the manga and serves as a supporting character in the early chapters of One Piece. And as you'll soon find out, One Piece has a huge cast of characters, and they often come back into the story in one way or another, so keep an eye out. On the receiving end of Luffy's Gum Gum Pistol is Iron Mace Alvida. Played by Ilia Israeles Palino, Alvida is one of the first antagonists of the One Piece manga and is the captain of the Alvida pirates, whose ship we saw earlier in the trailer, the Miss Love Duck. The boat that they're standing on in this scene does not seem to be the Miss Love Duck, however, so we'll have to see how they get to this point in the story. Luffy's fist cocks back and snaps right into Alvida's face as we quickly cut to black for the final scene of the trailer. Back in the Marine base courtyard from Shellstown, we get a bit of dialogue that's absent from the manga itself. All great fighters call out their finishing moves. This is a tongue-in-cheek nod to the practice of shonen manga characters naming their attacks and yelling them out when performing them. Of course, this works a lot better in the medium of manga and anime, but it's a bit strange when it comes to live actors. It appears Luffy's going to maintain this long-held tradition, but Zoro disagrees with Luffy's sentiments, suggesting that he may not be naming his attacks like he does in the manga. Admittedly, the names of some of these attacks are a mouthful, especially with the sword in your mouth, and this is something that works a lot better on the page, so I can understand why they might omit this. However, Luffy is talking about finishing moves, and not all attacks in general, so I can see them giving us a couple named attacks just as a treat for the fans. The last thing we see in this trailer is the logo for the live-action adaptation. Panning out from a render of Luffy from the manga, we get the title, One Piece, with a Japanese translation overlaid in the logo. One thing to note though is that Luffy is wearing what seems to be a post-time skip outfit, and we can see the sash around his waist. Eagle-eyed fans will realize though that Luffy himself here seems to be pre-time skip, as he's lacking the iconic X-shaped scar on his chest. And yes, there is a time skip, but that's like way later on into the series, so we won't have to worry about that in this adaptation anytime soon. We pan out, and one noticeable change is that in the manga's logo, Luffy actually makes up the I in One Piece, whereas here we find Luffy in the nose of the skull atop the O. However, the final E still resembles the anchor, just like the original logo. And that's about it. There's a couple more Easter eggs or hidden details tucked away in this trailer, but I mostly wanted to focus on things that were explicitly shown and stay away from the characters that are going to be in the season but not here in the trailer. There'll probably be another full official trailer in a month or so, maybe around One Piece Day, so we'll have a lot more to talk about then. And of course, the show will start streaming on August 31st. I appreciate you watching, and I hope you join me for the next video.